Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we are going to be looking at the historic best of one format for the weekly meta breakdown. We're going to look at the best winning decks for the last week. We got Modern Horizons 3 that hit the historic format. There were some pre-bans, but still a lot of the set is legal and it's an injection of a lot of powerful cards and new archetypes. So with this, kind of keep in mind, this is a best of one. I'll do best of three. This weekend is the Historic Metagame Challenge, so we'll cover a bunch of different decks you can bring for that. It is as well for July. It's going to be qualifier weekend for Historic, so best of one will also play an effect there. So this will give you kind of an early idea of what is working for the format. You're going to get the data from Untapped GG, companion tool that runs alongside Arena's client. You can download Untapped from the link in the video description down below. If you want to track your own win rates, I get a bunch of cool stats. And then I'll paste all these deck lists and timestamps so you can copy and paste to your heart's content. We're going to be focusing on Diamond and Mythic rank for this month. I've been playing a lot of this format. It's been my favorite format since the release. As you can see, someone made the leaderboard and has the highest win rate of people on the leaderboard right now, which is kind of cool. I just haven't been playing the volume of games needed to push for like a high finish, but the games I'm playing, I'm winning a lot of, which has been very, very sweet. So one kind of anecdotal thing I've noticed, there's like an MMR kind of weirdness because there's certain decks that are winning that just are very poorly constructed. I think it's just there's a little bit more of a casual element at times. Like we'll take a look really quick when we get to it, but the highest sheer win rate deck is an energy deck, but it's got like 75 cards with 24 lines in it. It just doesn't make sense. It's just like we took an energy deck and then added an extra 20 cards because we felt like it. But we'll kind of look at the breakdown first, and then we'll go into the individual decks. Boros Energy, 40% win rate, or not win rate, popularity almost. There is two decks here. There's a Lurrus version and there's a non-Lurrus version that plays Phlage and Fable the Mirrorbreaker. So it is being lumped into those two kind of categories. This is a very strong deck. I've been playing it. It is very, very strong. There's a lot of different ways to build it, and I still think there's ways you can hedge for the mirror. This being such a high percentage, there's ways that you can kind of configure your deck that kind of beat the mirrors and stuff like that. Additionally, I do think that there's decks that are being underrepresented right now. I think either the Jeskai Control or even like the one deck that I could have trouble with sometimes is the Enchantress deck. Solemnity stops energy, and then you can do Phyrexian Unlife to lock it out of the game. There's ways to kind of build in that sense as well. Next up is Izzet Wizards. The once mighty deck has fallen to about 6%. Elves at 4.3%. Squirrel Twin at 4%. Mono red at 2%. Mono green at like 2%. Azorius Control. Convoke really fell off as well. Just Convoke's basically a bad version of energy now. And then I don't like the Squirrel Twin just because you play a little bit into the energy decks as well. But I think there's ways to kind of beat the deck itself. So if we look, we see obviously energy, huge increase in play rate. We see the Wizards deck kind of decrease overall. But I think, like I said, you're seeing kind of the win rate correspond, but we'll jump into it. Look at the decks themselves. So we have 38,000 games from Diamond and Mythic played for the last week, June 18th to the 25th. Put a lower cap on to get some more decks showing up. This is what I mean with like this energy deck. 31 creatures, so it's 40 cards, 48, 53, 57, and then 24. So 77, 81 cards with 24 lines. It's just they took the energy deck, they threw some random cards in. Even like this is standard mono red prowess that's winning some games, which is a little skewed, I think. So I think there is a little softer of a metagame at times with this format. But looking at the actual, I kind of curated it to decks that I think are actually playable at a consistently high win rate. We have Kethis combo, 72%. So nothing really new in terms of cards for this deck, but it is a very strong deck. This can largely ignore life gain out of the decks, like the energy decks. It's going to win through Mill, so you don't have to really worry about that. You're using Mox Ambers, Delighted Halflings, generate mana. Rona taps and taps. Kethis basically then lets you start looping with the Relic of Legends to generate mana to just keep recasting Mox Ambers, as well as milling yourself. Eventually, you recast Jace multiple times, milling yourself to get enough cards in the library, and then you just keep recasting Jace to mill out your opponent. You can also just cast Jace Wielder of Mysteries with no cards in the library, draw, and win the game that way there. One Ring provides some more card advantage. Emery mills you into some of your combo pieces. Then you also have Agatha's Soul Cauldron, where you can put a Kethis underneath it, and then any of your other creatures become Kethis itself. There's also a way where you can have like Rona Emery kind of hybrid. So if you have a Rona, give it Emery's ability. You can tap it to cast a Mox Amber, and then the Mox Amber untaps the Rona Emery hybrid, and you could keep looping the two Mox Ambers to kind of churn through your deck that way and generate infinite mana. Moving on, we got the first of the Boros Energy decks. This one's at 71.7, so 72%. This is the Phlage version. So this one's opting to play Bone Crusher Giant. You'll sometimes see Fable the Mirror Breaker in the deck. The one thing that seems very odd in this deck to me is the addition of Roiling Vortex. Given that you will be free casting spells with your Amped Raptor, you will be taking 5 damage. So this seems very odd that this is included in the deck. I'm actually going to take a look to see if there's another version that's with Phlage, but not poorly constructed. Nope. So the thing I'd suggest, okay, so these are all the Lurrus versions. The one thing I'd suggest, don't play Rolling Vortex. I think this card's a trap in the deck. You're trying to beat the mirror with the anti-life game, but it's going to hurt you equally, given that you have Amped Raptor in the deck. The cleanest thing you can do with this is drop the Rolling Vortex. You can play Esper Sentinel. You can play even just getting rid of like Play with Fire seems kind of odd in this deck. I think all in all, it's a little weird, the configuration in some of these cases. Like, it's definitely winning games, but I don't think this is the optimal version. This here, you could be playing Static Prison instead. You can play Soul Warden instead, Esper Sentinel instead in the 1-drop slot. Fable the Mirror Breaker should probably be a couple cards in here as well. So there is some configurations that you can do to make the deck a little bit more efficient. The one thing I personally don't like Aether Hub in these decks, I can understand why, because you want to get that energy when you turn to Amped Raptor to hit your 3-drop, but I find a lot of times it makes the mana worse, just because you're playing a colorless line in a deck that's got a lot of colored requirements. In terms of the energy deck that I've been playing, so I'm 25-3 with this. I'm 9-0 in best of 3. I've 7-0'd as well, a historic event with it. So I've played this deck quite a bit. This entire run has just been Boros Energy. You could just see, like, from Diamond 4 to Mythic, I only lost 3 games. So this version of the deck, it's a lot cleaner. So we are using, this is the best of 1 version. I have a best of 3 version that's slightly different configuration. The best of 1 version is built to kind of deal with the mirror a little bit more, and I've kind of worked with ways with that. So Esper Sentinel in here helps with the card advantage in the main. It also helps against random control or combo decks. Card advantage. Out of Souls, as well as Soul Warden and Oscillant's Pride, just lets you kind of snowball. I went with a split of 1 Jolted Awake and 1 Goblin Bombardment. Jolted Awake helps in the Grandier matchups just to bring something back. It also lets you proactively play Lurrus. Goblin Bombardment is very useful in the mirror, especially if you're ahead. You can kind of control their board. It also enables you at any time to flip your Ajani, and it is a red permanent for Ajani, so it lets your 0 ability shoot them for a lot. The Amulets, the Helix help in the mirror, also helps against the Wizards matchup, and then it's just extra reach for the deck. In terms of the mana base, no Aether Hubs. I really like Sunbait Canyon just as a card advantage engine. We have Ganjo and Sokuzan for some utility, and then I went a 3-1 split for the Prismatic Vista. You really don't want a red basic, just given that you have a lot of 1 drops in terms of white cards. So with that deck here, I'm 25-3. You want to see the best of 3 version. So the best of 3 version, we're 9-0. So very similar kind of idea, but you might see versions with Voice of the Blessed in here. Very similar, playing some Leon and Vanguards. I might switch this to Esper Sentinel, all things considered. Wasn't in love with it. And then I did take out the red channel line Sokuzan just for another Battlefield Forge, just to have another dual land. Again, the bombardment could be, you could shift it, take out one. We have the sideboard as well as needed. So that's kind of the best of 3 version of the deck. There's videos up on my YouTube if you want to see for both. We did a VOD, like 2 hours playing the best 3-1. That's all there. Moving on, we go to Rakdos Vampires. This is probably one of the worst matchups for the energy deck if played optimally. So 71%. The reason this is such a bad matchup is Goblin Bombardment and Forsaken Miner Bloodghast can just pick apart your board. Your creatures aren't necessarily large. They're more synergistic, so this really punishes you. Also very hard to beat a turn 3 Vein Ripper. While you do have Static Discharge or the Galvanic Blast, or Static Prison Galvanic Discharge, it does require some setup, and you take a lot of damage in the meantime. This version here is on some Thoughtseize, Grave Expectation for some utility, Galvanic Discharge, Fatal Push, just a lot of removal and ability to kind of refill your hand with the deck itself. But this is the deck I think is the one I'm most scared of seeing on the other side of the field. Beatable, but it's definitely a challenging one. We then go to Mono Green Elves, 69%. So we got some upgrades here with Priest of Titania, just another way to generate a lot of mana for the deck. You have your 1-drops, Elvish Warmaster. This one's on Marwyn, Elvish Archdruid. We have Eldrazi, Corvisical, lets you play cards off the top of your library, put cards into play. Circle of Dream Druids as another big mana. Beast Whisper for card advantage. Disciple of Freyles as a way to draw some cards, which is nice. So it could be a land early and then value late. Then 2 Crater Hoof on the top end. Interestingly, no Allosaurus Shepherd. I think there's probably too much of a glut of 3-drops in this deck, to be honest. I would probably trim and play at least 2 Allosaurus Shepherds, just a nice other mana sink for the deck. But otherwise, this could be a very explosive deck. Dimir Mill, another deck that doesn't care about the life gain. So this one here, we're seeing attacked reasonably well for best of 1. I probably wouldn't be playing Edict that just playing more targeted removal. But Path to Peril is very good against all these small creature decks. Go Wide, Fatal Push, Ruin Crabs for mill, Glimpse the Unthinkable for mill, Drown in the Lock, Surgical Extraction, Fraying Sanity doubles mill. Tasha, a lot of these decks are fairly low curved, so just kind of milling over. A Jace to mill, and then some Archive Traps. So Archive Trap isn't as like guaranteed as it would be in Timeless where there's fetch lands, so you're leveraging things like Field of Ruin to enable that. Then we have Izzet Belcher. So Izzet got a bunch of new lands for this deck. So you have like Sundering Eruption, Valakut's in here, even stuff like Razor's Grass Ambush. I guess they're just playing more of these just to have additional lands, but this in a pinch can also be used as a removal spell. You'll see some Emeria calls in here. But the core of the deck, you're trying to get ahead on mana, and then you cast Iron Crag Feet, and then Goblin Charbelcher, and then you kill your opponent right away because there is no lands in your deck. All your lands are spells, so it's kind of a circumventing way around that there. So this just got a whole bunch of make treasures to ramp ahead. Go from there. We have Azorius Affinity, 64%. I think Affinity really took a hit from the energy decks. It's just a lot slower, and the board can get swarmed, so you can just kind of outpace it. But the deck itself is now introducing Kappa Cannoneer, 6 mana, 4/4, improvise, so you can use your artifacts to tap to cast it. It's got Ward 4, and then whenever another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you put a counter on it, and it can't be blocked this turn. So big unblockable. Ethereum Thopterus fuels you Ornithopters, Barb Spike, you have your Retrofitter kind of combo in a sense, where the Retrofitter can just kind of keep feeding more tokens to the Cannoneer. This one's got Helping Hand to reanimate some stuff. You got some size in here. Cool deck. I just think it's a little bit slower. It's like a tier slower now than the energy decks. Another deck that I think struggles a little now is the mono green devotion list. So this version's at 64%. The big card that they got access to is Fanatic of Ronus. 2 mana, 1/4, but it has Ferocious. So if you have creature power 4 or greater, taps for 4 green mana. It can also eternalize itself, so come back from the graveyard as a 4/4 snake, and then it views itself for the eternalize, so it then taps for 4 mana. This is on the Leyline version. We also see access to 6 in here for some additional. Some of them are still on Lucranos just as a reach blocker, which can be useful as well. Basically generate a whole bunch of mana, Nykthos tap on tap. Karn helps you find a bunch of utility cards. Given that it's best of 1, you could play just one ring. Contagion Engine is a card you might want to look at in the artifact package. The Contagion Engine basically can be a one-sided board wipe versus energy. Then go to Izzet Wizards, 61%. So this deck here is turning to the energy package as well, tuned to the narrative, as well as Galvanic Discharge, just flexible removal spells. This lets you kind of scale up and deal with bigger things. This one's also playing the full Flame of Anor. We see a split of Slickshot, Dreadhorde, and then 2 Balmor with the Soul Scar and Symmetry Sage in there. A lot of burn. We're also seeing Arena Glory, which is kind of sweet. This can allow you to like haste out a Dreadhorde Arcanist or Balmor, or even a Symmetry Sage, which could be kind of cool in that respect. No, so actually you can't do Symmetry Sage because the mana can't be spent on it, but Balmor and Dreadhorde can also work in that respect. Giganta Companion. And then lastly, we have Mono Blue Eldrazi, 57%. So this is kind of the big Eldrazi deck, colorless. So leveraging Ugin's Labyrinth. You have Emrakul on the top end. You could be Madnessed away. I don't think there's a way to enable. Actually, there is. Draw a card, then discard a card. So that's an interesting way to kind of enable it, that you can then Madness it out for 6 mana. Breaker of Creation gains you a whole bunch of life when it comes into play. Ugin as a sweeper. Probably would want to be more Ugins. Drowner of Truth as another way to have line drops in the deck, but also be big Eldrazi. Full set of Devourer here as well. You have Ugin's Binding, which is kind of a bounce effect, and then could be Cyclonic Rift when you cast a 7-drop. Solar Transformer comes into play tapped, and then lets you kind of ramp ahead. Can also be mana fixing and color. Mind Stone, and then Kozilek's Command as a way to be some removal. Just a flexible card, could give you some Eldrazi Scions, stuff like that. So interesting to see how this kind of works out in terms of an Eldrazi deck. That's it for the week. Let me know what you think. I'm going to see if I can find a better Phlage deck, and I will link it in the video description. I don't like that Phlage version of the energy deck, so find a tighter version. In any case, thanks for watching. Hope you have a great one, and stay safe.